She ended our 13-year marriage with a PDF. Just like that. 3 sentences, no emotion, no warning. I was in the middle of a deployment in Kandahar, 4 months into the heat, dust, and chaos, when I opened my laptop and saw the subject line, "Let's be adults about this." What came next wasn't a conversation. It was a statement. She'd filed for divorce, emptied our joint account, and moved her new boyfriend into our home in Spokane. I stared at that screen, jaw clenched, heart pounding, not because of heartbreak, but because I knew something bigger was unfolding. And by the end of this story, you'll see how a quiet soldier turned a betrayal into a takedown no one saw coming. My name's Nathan Briggs. I'm 42 years old and have served with the 82nd Airborne for over a decade. That night after reading the email, I took a cold shower in the communal stall, suited up for my shift, and told no one. When I got back to my bunk, I typed one word in response. Understood. No begging, no anger, just acknowledgement. Wilson, my bunkmate, asked if I was okay. I told him it was just stuff back home. He nodded, didn't pry. That's how it is with military guys, we carry things different. The truth is, deep down, I wasn't even shocked. I'd seen the signs before I left, the cold hugs, the late nights at work, the way her eyes stopped lighting up when I walked through the door. But I hadn't expected this. Still, what she didn't know was that I'd been quietly preparing for months. Not for war, at least not the one overseas, but for the one waiting at home. You see, I don't start fights, but I finish them. And if you think this story ends with a broken man coming home to nothing, you've got it all wrong. Stick around, because in Chapter 2, you'll find out just how far I went to protect what mattered, and how the smallest red flags became the start of something far bigger. 6 months before I deployed to Kandahar, things at home had already started shifting. It didn't happen all at once. It wasn't explosive. It was more like a slow erosion, little changes that didn't scream betrayal, but whispered it. Becky stopped asking about my day. That was the first thing I remember clearly. I'd come home from drills or training, dirty and exhausted, and she'd be sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, or watching some reality show, barely lifting her eyes. She used to meet me at the door, wrap her arms around me, ask about every detail like it mattered. But over time, the curiosity faded. The warmth cooled. Then came the late nights at the dental office where she worked reception. It wasn't unusual at first, everyone has busy seasons. But when I asked how things were going, she'd offer vague answers. Just catching up, she'd say, or running behind. But something in her tone had changed. It felt mechanical, like she was saying what she thought I wanted to hear. The gym came next. 3 nights a week. She said she needed to clear her head. I didn't object. A healthy routine is good for the body and mind. But what nagged at me was how she always came back looking exactly as she left, hair perfectly dry, makeup untouched, not a hint of sweat on her clothes. Still, I didn't accuse. That's never been my way. My father raised me to think, before speaking, to never pick a fight I couldn't finish. And so I said nothing. But I watched. She started buying new clothes. Nothing outrageous, but not the kind of thing you'd wear to the dentist's office either. When I'd ask, she'd brush it off. Just needed a little something new, she'd say. She started seeing friends I'd never heard of before. New names, girls' weekends, out-of-town events. I was happy she had a social life, but when I offered to meet them, she'd laugh it off. "They're not really the type you'd get along with," she said once. Her phone, which used to lie face up on the kitchen counter, was suddenly always in her pocket, locked face down with new passwords I didn't know. I'm not naive. I'd seen this before in other marriages, guys in my unit whose wives drifted away while they were deployed, who came back to empty houses, divorce papers, sometimes even new locks. But I didn't want to believe I was one of them. I held out hope. Still, I made moves. Quiet ones, calculated ones. The first thing I did was open a storage unit on the far side of Spokane, one of those no-frills places with 24-hour access and security cameras. I moved anything that mattered there, my grandfather's watch, my mom's old silver, set the paperwork for the house, our marriage license, my birth certificate. Most of it was under my name alone, thanks to the VA loan, and I intended to keep it that way. I told Becky I was reorganizing our files in case anything happened while I was overseas. She nodded, uninterested. Then I opened a separate bank account at a different bank entirely. I didn't funnel large sums, just a few hundred here and there, enough to give me a cushion if things ever went sideways. I never wanted to believe I'd need it, but something deep in my gut said otherwise. That instinct, sharpened by years in combat zones, never failed me. I wasn't planning for the worst. I was preparing for it. Becky hugged me goodbye at the airport like someone saying farewell to a co-worker, transferring departments not to a husband heading off to war. Her eyes were dry, her voice flat. "Stay safe, okay?" she said. "No, I love you. No tears. Just goodbye." I boarded that flight with a heaviness I couldn't explain, something beyond fear or sadness. It felt like walking away from a life already gone. The next few weeks in Kandahar were typical heat, sand, tension, the kind of routine that numbs your senses until a rocket reminds you you're still alive. I kept my head down, stayed focused, but back home stayed with me. Every now and then I'd replay those last few months, trying to figure out when exactly the shift had happened. It was like chasing smoke. Then came the email, the cold detachment, the joint account cleaned out. Jeremy, the boyfriend, moved into my house. Not our house. Mine. I realized then how thorough she'd been. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I'd been one step ahead. She might have been playing her game, but I had laid my foundation. Still, I wasn't ready for what came next. 2 weeks after the email, I was sitting in the mess hall, eating scrambled eggs that tasted more like rubber than food, when my phone buzzed. It was a bank alert, an $88,500 withdrawal. My fork froze mid-air. I logged in. The balance on our joint account, $22 and $37, and the savings, $47,000 we had built over a decade, gone, transferred to an account I didn't recognize. I didn't say a word, didn't make a scene, just stood, walked out into the desert air, and stared at the horizon like it might give me answers. It didn't, but it gave me space. I went to the base's phone center that night and called the bank. The woman on the line sounded nervous when I asked for transaction details. She told me the withdrawals started small, just a few hundred at a time. Then they jumped $5,000, $10,000 finally, that $88,500 transfer. All of it began the day after I deployed. That was no coincidence. That night, Wilson found me in the hallway, silent, still. He'd pulled me out of a bad firefight, once a solid guy. "You good?" he asked. I told him the truth. My wife emptied our accounts, sent divorce papers, moved her boyfriend into our house. He didn't say, "Damn, man," or "I'm sorry." He just asked, "What's your plan?" And that right there was the moment something inside me changed. I didn't fully know my plan yet, but I was about to find it, because Becky thought I was out of reach. But what she didn't understand is I'm a soldier, and soldiers know how to come home prepared. In Chapter 3, I'll show you exactly what I discovered when I logged into our home security cameras from 7,000 miles away, and how a quiet surveillance system became the first step in a war she never saw coming. That night after my call to the bank confirmed what I already feared. I couldn't sleep. The desert winds rattled the thin walls of the barracks, and even with earplugs I could hear boots shuffling, men laughing, someone Skyping with his kids back home. Life all around me moved forward, and mine had just hit a wall. I lay on my cot, staring at the ceiling, thinking not just about the money or the house, but about her. Becky, the woman I met at a barbecue in Spokane 13 years ago. The woman I built a life with, shared secrets with, made sacrifices for. And now that woman was living in my house with another man laughing in my kitchen, drinking from my coffee mug. I knew because I saw it. What Becky had forgotten or maybe never understood was that our home security system uploaded everything to the cloud. I could log in from anywhere, and I did. I sat up in bed, opened my laptop, and accessed the cameras. It was 3:43 a.m. in Afghanistan. Back in Washington, it was just after dinner time. The live feed opened to a shot of the driveway. A truck I didn't recognize was parked there, dark gray muddy tires, dented rear bumper. Then I saw the front door open, and out came a man I had never seen before, walking my dog Scout. He had my leash in his hand, my Seahawk sweatshirt on his back, and a smug confidence that made my stomach twist. Becky appeared behind him holding a glass of wine barefoot on the porch, smiling like everything was normal. I clicked through the feed's kitchen hallway back patio. The man was everywhere. Cooking on the stove I installed during leave last year. Sitting on the couch I carried in from the truck myself, using my damn coffee mug. It wasn't jealousy or sadness that hit me in that moment. It was something sharper, colder. I wasn't looking at my wife anymore. I was looking at someone I didn't recognize and someone who clearly never really knew me. She thought she'd pulled it off, that I was thousands of miles away, unaware, powerless. But that night I felt more focused than I ever had. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to call. I was going to finish what she started on my terms. I opened my phone and started building a list. The kind of list I used to make before missions, who to contact, what documents to check, next steps. First, James. He was an Army buddy who had gone to law school after getting injured in a jump. We hadn't talked in a few years, but I remembered him saying, "If you ever need quiet legal help, I got you." I sent him an email, "Need legal help, discreet and urgent." He replied an hour later, "Call me. Secure line only." The next day I used the comms center on base to call him. I explained everything, the email, the emptied accounts, the new guy in my house, the possible fraud. James didn't interrupt. He just asked for facts. When I finished, he was silent for a second, then said, "You did the right thing by preparing. You may have saved yourself more than you know." I told him Becky had refinanced the house, or at least I suspected she had. She'd brought it up once a year ago, something about freeing up cash and downsizing, but I'd told her it wasn't necessary. Now I had a sick feeling she'd forged my signature while I was overseas. James asked me to send him everything I had: mortgage documents, VA, loan records, bank statements. I had most of it backed up. He promised to start digging. "But you need to understand," he said, "if she forged your name and used your VA-backed mortgage to get money, this isn't just divorce-level stuff. This is federal. If you're still following this story, hit the like button right now, because what's coming next is something no one saw coming. And drop a comment below if you've ever had to keep calm while someone tried to dismantle your life." That night I logged back into the cameras. I watched as Becky and her new boyfriend, Jeremy, I learned his name, later sat on the back porch drinking wine, laughing under the string lights I'd hung up during my last leave. I didn't feel rage. I felt mission clarity. She wasn't just moving on. She was erasing me, bit by bit, and that wasn't something I could let happen. I called the mortgage company from the base again the next day and asked for a copy of the most recent loan documents. I didn't give much away, just said I needed them for a VA audit. The woman on the phone hesitated, but eventually agreed to mail them to my permanent address on file, which, thanks to a little foresight, was not the house in Spokane, but a P.O. box I set up months earlier. Another layer of planning that paid off. 2 days later, James called. He sounded different, tense, but excited. "I found something," he said. "There was a refinance 3 months ago. It was processed in Spokane, and you're listed as the primary applicant." My blood ran cold. I never signed anything I said. "I know," James replied. "I compared it to your driver's license signature. It's not even close." She tried to fake it, but she botched it. "Middle initial's wrong. The G in your last name loops backward. It's definitely a forgery." That moment hit like a detonation. She hadn't just betrayed me personally. She had broken the law on federal housing documents during an active deployment. It wasn't just emotional now. It was criminal. "You ready to go after her?" James asked. I didn't even hesitate. "Yes," I said, "but not just her. If Jeremy's involved, I want him too." James laughed short and dry. "Then you better buckle in. This might be bigger than you think." And he was right, because what started as a painful betrayal was about to unfold into a full-blown criminal conspiracy, one that reached far beyond Becky, far beyond Jeremy, and deep into a system that preyed on military families when they were most vulnerable. In Chapter 4, I'll walk you through the day I came back to American soil, not as a heartbroken husband, but as a soldier on a new kind of mission. And the first place I went wasn't home. It was to a diner with James, where I'd learned that Becky and Jeremy weren't just selfish. They were part of something calculated, something organized. And that's when the real operation began. 2 months after Becky's email dropped like a bomb into my inbox, I touched down on U.S. soil without telling a single soul. No family pickups, no welcome signs. Just a rented Ford Fusion from Spokane Airport under a false name and a reservation at a no-name motel downtown. I'd done it, like a mission, quiet, precise, controlled. I wasn't home to mourn. I was home to investigate. The next morning I met James at a diner off Highway 2, 10 miles outside of town. He looked like he hadn't slept much. "You look like hell," he said, as he slid into the booth. "Feel like it," I answered. But there was something electric in the air, the kind of tension that tells you you're about to learn something you can't unlearn. James laid a folder on the table. "Everything we've talked about so far. VA loan paperwork, bank records, your original signature, and this." He pulled out a single page and tapped it. "This is what changes everything." It was a refinance application with my name on it, but the signature wasn't mine. Not even close. The middle initial was wrong. The loops didn't match. James had compared it to my driver's license and military paperwork. Whoever forged it tried hard, but not hard enough. "She forged my signature," I asked, though it came out more like a confirmation than a question. 3 months ago, used the equity in your house to pull out $330,000. James leaned forward. "And here's the kicker. She listed her boyfriend as co-applicant, Jeremy Ryan. He has 2 DUIs and a fraud conviction from 2019. My breath caught. Not because of the number, though it was staggering, but because I knew now this wasn't just a messy divorce. This was fraud, conspiracy, a deliberate betrayal. "Tell me what my options are," I said. James didn't flinch. "You can let it go. Walk away, start over. Or you can fight legally, file fraud reports, freeze the loan, trigger a financial investigation. But it won't be quiet. It'll drag her into court. Him, too." I stared at that forged signature again, at the audacity of it all. The woman I married not only left me while I was at war, she signed my name, took my equity, gave it to a con artist, and moved him into my home. I looked up at James. I want what's legally mine, and I want her to understand consequences. James smiled. "Then here's what we do. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you walk away, or dig in and fight?" That afternoon I drove past my old house for the first time since returning. Jeremy's truck wasn't in the driveway, but Becky's car was. I didn't stop. I parked 2 blocks away, watched the house like I used to watch patrol zones, patient, quiet, observant. I thought about walking up to the front door, about ringing the bell and asking her what the hell she was thinking. But that wasn't the plan. The plan was bigger now. The next morning, I went straight to the bank where the refinance had been processed. I met with the loan officer, showed him my military ID, my driver's license, and a printed copy of the forged documents. I watched the blood drain from his face as he flipped pages. "I'll need to report this immediately," he said. "I understand," I told him. "I've already filed a police report." That night I got a text from Becky. "Who have you been talking to at the bank?" Jeremy said someone was asking questions. I didn't respond. The silence was louder than any reply. The next day I went to the county clerk's office, filed paperwork contesting the refinance due to fraud, registered a formal notice on the property. No changes to the deed or financial actions could be made without my presence. 2 days later, she called. I let it go to voicemail. "Nathan, we need to talk. The bank called about the house. What are you doing? If this is about the divorce, we can discuss it like adults." Those words again. Like adults. The same ones she used when she ended our marriage through a PDF. I didn't call back. But that night, James did. "They froze the refinance funds," he said. "But it gets deeper. Jeremy, your wife's boyfriend, was pulled over this morning, driving your truck. Suspended license. Vehicle got impounded." I exhaled a bitter laugh, slipping out. Good. James didn't stop there. He had prescription pads in the truck. From the dental office where Becky works. Not blank. They were filled out. I went quiet. "She's been stealing?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Looks that way. Police are investigating now. Could be serious. State and federal level." And just like that I felt it, the scope of this whole mess expanding again. What had started as a personal betrayal had spiraled into criminal territory. She hadn't just broken my heart. She'd broken laws. I sat on the edge of my motel bed and stared at the wall. I thought about the kitchen I'd renovated with my own hands, the backyard where I taught our dog to fetch, the coffee mug I'd bought her from a roadside gas station because it had her favorite quote. None of that mattered to her now. She'd given it all away like it cost her nothing. Still, I had one thing left that she didn't know about. A camera system with full interior coverage. Installed last year. Still active, still connected to cloud storage. It was time to use it. If you've ever had someone betray you this deeply, someone you loved, how did you respond? Share your story below. You're not alone. Because in Chapter 5, you'll see exactly what I saw. Live footage of Jeremy and a real estate agent walking through my house planning to sell it. And that, my friend, was the moment everything flipped. That was when it stopped being personal and became a takedown. The day after James told me about the forged refinance and the prescription pads found in my truck, I woke up before sunrise, made a cup of gas station coffee, and opened my laptop. The interior cameras of my home, still quietly connected to cloud storage, had captured hours of footage while I was overseas. Becky had forgotten all about them, or maybe she thought I wouldn't check. Either way, what I saw next changed the course of everything. At exactly 10:12 a.m., a car pulled into the driveway. On the door was a logo for a real estate company I didn't recognize. A man stepped out, mid-40s, button-down shirt, expensive shoes, carrying a leather folder. A few seconds later, Jeremy walked out the front door like he owned the place. They shook hands, made small talk, then went inside. I switched to the living room feed and turned up the audio. That's when I heard it. The real estate agent, Daniel Spencer, was discussing listing the house. "We'll list at $470,000. He said, his voice calm, casual. "Buyers ready to offer $420. Everyone walks away happy. Jeremy leaned against the kitchen counter, the one I built myself, nodding. Let's get it sold before the end of the month. Becky says the husband's being a problem. Daniel waved dismissively. Military guys always bark. They've got deployments, pensions too busy to fight long term. He'll take a settlement and disappear. My jaw tightened. I couldn't believe the arrogance, the disrespect. My home, my name on the deed, my equity all treated like some temporary asset they could flip and pocket. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't barking, I was biting, just waiting for the right moment. And now, I had them, on video, discussing wire fraud, property fraud, and conspiracy to commit both. If you're watching this right now and you've ever been underestimated, ever had someone think you wouldn't fight back, tell me in the comments what you did, or what you wish you had done. Because this right here was the moment they crossed a line I wasn't going to let them walk away from. I immediately forwarded the video clips to James and followed up with a call. He didn't even say hello. I just saw the footage, he said. This isn't just fraud. This is a criminal enterprise, and they're stupid enough to discuss it like it's a Craigslist deal. Send it to the FBI, I asked. Already did, he said. They've had an open file on Jeremy Ryan for months. Looks like he's been pulling this act with other women, especially spouses of deployed military. Spencer's been his go-to agent for the past 3 years. That part hit hard. It wasn't just me. This was a system, a strategy. Women vulnerable from stress, loneliness, or manipulation. Men far from home, blind to what was happening until it was too late. And homes, pensions, futures being stolen while they served their country. It made me sick. By early afternoon, I was sitting in James's office reviewing affidavits and prepping documentation for the FBI. My hands were steady, but my heart beat faster than it had in months. The feeling wasn't anger anymore, it was purpose. Finally, I had direction, a target. I wasn't chasing Becky's approval or mourning our marriage. I was building a case that might help expose something much bigger than just my broken home. That evening, I logged into the camera system one last time before disabling it permanently. I watched Becky walk into the living room barefoot on the phone, laughing. Jeremy came in behind her and put his hand on her back, like it was nothing, like none of this mattered. Then she sat on the couch, my couch, and started flipping through what looked like listing paperwork. That was the last image I saw of her inside my house. The next morning, the FBI showed up in unmarked vehicles. I watched from 2 blocks away as they walked into my home with warrants in hand. Spencer and Jeremy were both inside reviewing documents for the sale. Both were arrested on the spot. I saw Jeremy get cuffed and walked out, still trying to argue. Spencer looked stunned, like someone had just canceled his country club membership. Becky wasn't home, but the agents told me she arrived mid-raid, stood on the lawn with her hands over her mouth, watching as her carefully laid plans unraveled in real time. I didn't walk up to her. I didn't need to. She looked around, confused, looking for answers. But I was done giving her any. What would you have done if you saw the people who betrayed you getting arrested in your own front yard? Would you confront them? Watch in silence. Share your answer below. I'm curious. That afternoon, Agent Patel called. We've been building a case against Jeremy and Spencer for over a year, she said. Your footage gave us everything we needed. We're moving forward with federal charges, conspiracy wire, fraud, attempted property theft, and more. And Becky? I asked. We're still determining her role. That may come down to how much she knew and what you want to pursue. For the first time since that email in Kandahar, I felt something close to relief. Not because I got revenge, but because the truth was finally louder than the lies. What came next was a choice. Do I let Becky go quietly, or do I bring her into the fire, too? The law was on my side now, but justice and peace aren't always the same thing. In Chapter 6, I'll take you through the aftermath, how the FBI dug into Jeremy and Spencer's network, how Becky responded, and the surprising way the system finally started working in my favor. Because sometimes the only way to rebuild is to burn it all down first. The day after the FBI arrested Jeremy and Spencer, I sat in my motel room staring at my phone. Becky had texted again, "Nathan, please call me. The bank is saying something about fraud. Jeremy got arrested. I don't understand what's happening." I didn't reply, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because there was nothing left to explain. She made her choices. I made mine. And for the first time in months, I wasn't reacting. I was in control. Later that afternoon, I met with Agent Patel and Agent Donovan at the FBI field office in Spokane. The building was cold, sterile, exactly what I expected from the place that had just dismantled the quiet conspiracy tearing through my life. We went through my statement line by line. They had documents, screenshots, recordings, everything James and I had pulled together over the past few weeks. "This helps establish a pattern," Agent Patel explained. "We've found similar cases, wives of deployed service members targeted by Jeremy and Spencer. Your footage confirms premeditation, false documentation, and active conspiracy." "How many?" I asked. 11 other families so far," she said. "All military, all involving properties being sold below market value with Jeremy profiting on the back end." The thought hit me like a gut punch. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was a piece in something larger, something far more sinister than I'd imagined. And in a strange way, that gave me strength. "We're still assessing Becky's involvement," Agent Donovan said. "Did she ever express concerns about finances, mention being house poor, or suggest selling?" I thought back. "She said that once, maybe twice, around the time she started pulling away. Did she ever mention refinancing with your permission?" "No," I said. "She never discussed it, just did it. Then she forged your signature on a federal loan application. That's a felony, but whether we charge her may depend on your cooperation and intent." That was the moment I realized I had power, not just legal, but moral. I could press charges and let her drown with Jeremy and Spencer, or I could offer her a deal, full restitution, walk away with nothing, and never touch another piece of my life again. What would you do? Would you let her burn, or let her go with conditions? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I know this part's tough. Over the next 2 weeks, the investigation deepened. Jeremy and Spencer were both indicted on federal charges, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, identity theft, and knowingly defrauding military personnel. Spencer's real estate license was suspended. Jeremy was denied bail due to repeat offenses. James and I handed over every bit of evidence we had: emails, surveillance, phone logs. Then came the meeting with Becky's attorney. She claimed Becky had no knowledge of the scheme, that she believed Jeremy was helping her secure a financial future while I was cutting her out. They said she didn't know about the other women or the other homes, that she'd been manipulated. I didn't believe it, but I didn't need her behind bars. I needed her gone. So we negotiated a settlement. She would forfeit all claims to the house, my military pension, and any assets we once shared. She would sign a written confession admitting she forged my name and allowed Jeremy to access my accounts. In exchange, I wouldn't pursue criminal charges. The FBI agreed, as long as her statement could be used to corroborate the larger case. It wasn't forgiveness. It was closure. A week later, I met with James on the courthouse steps. "You did it," he said. "They're going down, and you're walking away with everything still yours." "I didn't want to win," I said quietly. "I just didn't want to lose." He nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. Becky never looked me in the eye after that. She signed the papers with trembling hands, didn't say a word. She'd moved out of the house. Jeremy's truck was long gone. The place was empty now, quiet in a way that felt heavy, not peaceful. Agent Patel called me the day the charges were finalized. Jeremy took a plea deal. 8 years in federal prison. Spencer's looking at 12. And Becky's statement helped seal it. We found 2 more families because of her records. Good, I said. They deserve peace, too. You know, people think justice is about revenge. But it's not. It's about clarity, about seeing the truth laid bare, about knowing you weren't crazy and you weren't weak. You were just trusting, and someone took advantage of that. But now they don't get to win. If you've ever had someone lie, cheat, or steal from you, what helped you rebuild, what made you stronger, let me know below. I read every comment. That night I walked through the house, one last time. The living room, the kitchen, the hallway I painted during. Leave it all felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed. I couldn't stay there. Too many ghosts. Too many memories I didn't want anymore. In Chapter 7, I'll take you through what happened when I sold the house, left Spokane behind, and started over in a way I never expected. Because the fight might have been over, but healing. That was a whole new battle. A month after Becky signed the settlement, I stood in the living room of what used to be our house for the last time. The walls were bare, the furniture gone, the echo of my own footsteps, the only sound in the space that once held holiday dinners, quiet mornings, and long silences that should have told me everything. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like evidence, like a scene preserved for the aftermath of something no one saw coming. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I just stood there and let the finality of it sink in. Then I locked the door, dropped the keys off with the real estate agent, and drove away without looking back. The house sold quickly. Market was hot in Spokane, and the listing, once scrubbed clean of fraud, drew offers within a week. I didn't haggle. I just wanted it gone. We closed at $460,000, and after the dust of legal cleanup and back and forth with the FBI, I walked away with every cent of what was mine. My portion of the equity, my protection fund from the separate account, my dignity. I used the money to buy a small cabin outside Missoula, Montana. 2 bedrooms, 10 acres, a creek running through the backwoods. No neighbors for miles, just pines and open air, and the sound of my own boots on the porch. I'd done 20 years in the Army by then, enough for retirement, enough to be done. I filed the paperwork, hung up my uniform, and stepped into civilian life with no plan, except this: keep my hands busy and my head quiet. Scout came with me, of course. That dog had seen more of life's changes than most people ever will. Every morning I'd make coffee, feed him, and walk the land. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. No forged signatures, no empty promises, just wood, steel, and soil, honest things. The adjustment wasn't smooth. There were nights I'd wake up thinking I was still deployed, expecting alarms, distant gunfire. There were mornings when the silence rang louder than any explosion. I wasn't used to the stillness. After so many years of orders, objectives, and schedules, peace felt like drifting. I needed something to do, so I started building. Not for money at first, just for therapy. A bench for the porch, a birdhouse, a bookshelf. I'd never trained in carpentry, but working with my hands gave me focus. Something about taking raw, unfinished wood and shaping it into something useful felt honest. One neighbor, a rancher a few miles down the road, asked if I could fix a busted gate. I did. Then came a request to build a storage shed. Word got around. Before I knew it, I was doing odd jobs, furniture builds, repairs, nothing major, just enough to keep the days full and the mind quiet. One afternoon, while replacing floorboards on an old barn, I got a letter forwarded from my old P.O. box. No return address, just my name, neat handwriting. Inside was a handwritten note from a woman in Fort Worth, Texas. Her husband had been deployed with the Navy. Jeremy and Spencer had targeted her the same way they'd targeted Becky and me. But because of the case we built, the FBI had intervened early. She wrote, "You don't know me, but you saved our home. You fought back when it would have been easier to walk away. Thank you." I read that letter twice. Then I pinned it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a trout. It stayed there for a long time. Have you ever rebuilt your life from the ground up, literally or emotionally? If so, I want to hear about it. Share your story in the comments. You'd be surprised who might need to read it. As weeks passed, the media forgot about the arrests. Jeremy was sentenced to 8 years. Spencer got 12. Becky took a deal, kept her record clean, and disappeared. James told me she'd moved back to Oregon, picked up work at another dental office. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to know. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was just done. What surprised me most was that I didn't miss her. I missed the idea of what we had of coming home to someone who knew me, of shared holidays, of built traditions. But I'd come to understand those things weren't real. They were habits, familiarity. They weren't love. One cold November evening, I sat by the fireplace with Scout asleep at my feet and watched the sun set behind the trees. The light came in through the windows and caught the letter on the fridge. I stood up, walked over, and ran my fingers across the words. That's when I realized something that hit deeper than any betrayal ever had. I didn't just survive it. I changed it. I helped stop it. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I'd lost something. I felt like I'd built something new, something clean, something no one could touch. In Chapter 8, I'll take you back into the case, because just when I thought it was over, James discovered something that tied Jeremy's scam to a larger network of real estate shell companies. Turns out this rabbit hole went deeper than any of us imagined. It had been nearly 4 months since I left Spokane behind, and life in Montana had finally started to feel settled. I kept my days simple: early mornings, long walks with Scout, small carpentry jobs around the county. I'd put the past behind me, or at least pushed it far enough away that it didn't burn anymore. The legal battles were over, the arrests had made the papers, and my name was finally untangled from the mess Becky had left behind. I wasn't trying to forget it all. I just wasn't letting it define me anymore. Then one evening, just after dinner, I got a call from James. I hadn't heard from him in weeks, which was unusual. He usually checked in every Friday with some deadpan joke or an update from the Spokane courthouse. But this time, his voice was tight, serious. "You sitting down?" he asked. "I can be," I said, pulling out a kitchen chair. "You remember that real estate agent, Spencer?" "Yeah. He's in prison." "Right. But during discovery, the feds started pulling his transaction history, and it goes way deeper than just Jeremy and the military wives." I sat up, straighter. "How deep? Try a network of shell companies. Dozens. All buying and flipping houses tied to divorces, foreclosures, and get this, VA loan properties. They were targeting military-linked homes, specifically. Easy equity, lower oversight, desperate sellers." The words hit me like a slap. This wasn't just personal anymore. It wasn't even regional. It was a system one designed to bleed people dry while they were serving their country far from home, unaware. "Spencer was the front," James continued. "But behind him, there are 3 companies registered under different names in Nevada and Delaware. They move money fast, buy a house cheap from a vulnerable seller, sell it through a partner firm, and funnel profits through a third party. I stood up, heart pounding. So this wasn't just Jeremy's little hustle. No, James said. Jeremy was small-time, but he was a recruiter. Found the women, got inside their heads, pushed the narrative, connected them to Spencer. Spencer handled the sales. But above that, there's a guy named Todd Kinley. Never showed up before. Real estate investment consultant. Quiet, clean record. But his name is on every one of those shell firms. I leaned on the counter, the past flooding back in a wave I wasn't ready for. I thought I'd closed the door on this part of my life. But apparently that door had more behind it. James kept talking. The FBI's building a case, but it's tricky. Kinley never touches paperwork, doesn't meet clients, just moves the money. And what do they want from me? They want your story again. But more than that, they want your help, because you're the only one so far who documented the fraud before the house was sold. Everyone else came in too late. This was the part where I could have said no. I had every right to hang up, to walk back out into the trees and keep living the life I'd finally built. But I didn't, because I remembered that letter from the woman in Fort Worth. I remembered what it felt like to be 7,000 miles away while your life was being gutted back home. And more than anything, I remembered the look on Jeremy's face when they let him out of my house in handcuffs. That wasn't justice yet. That was just the start. Have you ever thought something was over only to learn it was just the tip of the iceberg? Let me know in the comments. I want to know who else out there's walked this road. I agreed to talk to the FBI again. This time they flew me out to D.C. I sat in a quiet conference room with Agent Patel and a few new faces from the Financial Crimes Division. They laid out charts, property records, bank transfers. There were dozens of families, some military, some civilian, but all targeted through the same playbook: emotional leverage, fraudulent refinancing, and rapid flip property sales. One case mirrored mine almost exactly. A Marine major in North Carolina deployed to Djibouti. Wife refinanced their home without consent. Boyfriend listed as co-buyer. Spencer sold the house 2 weeks later. Profits vanished into a Nevada LLC. The major came home to nothing but a storage locker and a court summons. Another case involved a young Air Force pilot in Texas. Same story, different names. Agent Patel asked if I'd be willing to testify, not just for your case, she said, but to help establish a pattern. We're building a federal racketeering charge, but we need real-world impact. We need the human side. I thought about it for maybe 5 seconds. You've got it, I said. Tell me when and where. That night back at the hotel, I couldn't sleep, not because I regretted the decision, but because I understood what it meant. I was stepping back into a story I thought I'd finished, but maybe that was the point. Maybe this wasn't just my story anymore. In Chapter 9, I'll take you inside the courtroom, into the day I faced the people who turned heartbreak into a business. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't walk away, it's stand up and speak. The morning I walked into the federal courthouse in D.C., I wasn't wearing a uniform. No combat boots, no rank on my chest, just a simple button-down slacks and a steel calm that had taken me months to build. The room was colder than I expected, all marble and silence. I wasn't on trial, but it still felt like I had something to prove, not just to the court, but to every soldier who ever came home to find everything gone. They called me as a witness mid-morning. Agent Patel gave me a small nod from the back of the room. I took the oath, sat down at the witness stand, and looked out at the people who had once tried to sell off my life, like it was nothing more than a transaction. Spencer sat stiff in a cheap suit. Jeremy slouched like he didn't care. And behind them, sitting apart from the others, was Todd Kinley, the man who had never spoken to me, never signed anything, but who was the spider at the center of this web. He didn't look angry. He looked amused. The prosecutor asked me to start from the beginning. So I did. I told them about Kandahar, about Becky's email, about the bank accounts, the forged refinance, the cameras, the planning. I walked them through every step, every document, every time I chose not to scream, but instead gather facts. Every time I swallowed pride to make room for strategy. I showed them the footage Jeremy and Spencer in my living room discussing price points, laughing about how military guys always bark but never bite. I told them how wrong they were. The courtroom stayed silent. No coughing, no scribbling, just attention. Then the prosecutor asked me the question I knew was coming. Why didn't you walk away? You could have just started over. And I said, because walking away doesn't stop it from happening to the next guy or the next family. I didn't just lose a house. I nearly lost everything I was fighting to protect overseas. I had to fight again, this time at home. That was the moment I saw Kinley's smirk falter. Just a flicker, but I caught it. Have you ever had to stand face to face with someone who tried to destroy you? What did you say? Or what do you wish you'd said? Drop it in the comments. Someone out there might nod your words more than you know. After my testimony, they called up 2 more victims. A Navy wife whose husband had been deployed to Bahrain. A young Army medic who lost her home after a forged power of attorney. Different cities, same scam, same names. By the afternoon, the courtroom had shifted. The defense stopped objecting. The jury leaned in closer, and by the end of the day, Kinley's lawyers asked for a private recess. The next morning, James called me from the courthouse steps. They cracked, he said. Kinley's flipping on his partners. Jeremy and Spencer are done. The feds are moving forward with asset seizures. I should have felt relief, but what I felt was something quieter, satisfaction, not revenge. Not joy, just the knowledge that the system had finally moved, and this time in the right direction. A few weeks later, I got another letter in the mail. This one was from a Marine sergeant stationed in Okinawa. He wrote, I heard about what you did. I just wanted to say thank you. We almost signed the papers. My wife stopped when she saw your story. She said something didn't feel right. You gave us a chance to fix it before it was too late. I read it sitting on the back porch, coffee in one hand, Scout at my feet. I didn't frame that letter. I didn't tape it to the fridge. I just folded it and kept it in my wallet close to me. Because that's when it hit me. Sometimes we don't get to choose the battles we fight, but we do get to choose who we fight for. Have you ever helped someone just by telling the truth, by refusing to stay quiet? Let me know. Let others see that standing up still matters. In Chapter 10, I'll tell you what happened when Becky reached out again months later from a place I didn't expect, with words I never thought I'd hear, and how, for the first time, I had to decide not how to fight, but how to forgive, or whether I even should. It was a cold March afternoon when Becky reached out again. Nearly a year had passed since I'd last seen her name on my phone. I was in the garage, sanding down a piece of reclaimed oak for a bookshelf, when the screen lit up with an unfamiliar number. I let it ring. No voicemail. Then a text came through. Hi, Nathan. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I'm in Spokane. Could we talk just once? I stared at the message for a long time. My first instinct was to delete it, block the number, pretend like it had never come through. But there was something in her wording, maybe the way she said just once, that made me hesitate. I'd spent so long cleaning up the wreckage she left behind. I hadn't once thought about what might have happened to her after it all came crashing down. I didn't reply that day or the next, but the question stayed with me. What could she possibly want to say? Now there was no money to recover, no marriage to save, no trust to rebuild. Still a part of me, maybe the part that once loved her, was curious. So I agreed to meet. Neutral place, public, broad daylight. We sat on a bench near Riverfront Park. She looked thinner, older somehow. Not in the way people age naturally, but like someone who'd carried weight they weren't built to bear. Her hair was tied back. No makeup. She held a paper cup of coffee but didn't sip it. "Thanks for coming," she said. I nodded, said nothing. She looked at me for a long moment. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know I've spent the last year trying to figure out how I got here. I let someone into my life who convinced me you were the enemy, and I let myself believe it because it made leaving easier." I didn't answer right away. There wasn't anything I could say that would undo what she did. I'd rebuilt my life, yes, but some cracks never fully seal. She continued, "I know Jeremy's in prison. I know I should be too. But I'm not here to ask for mercy. I just needed you to hear that I wasn't trying to destroy you. I was trying to escape a version of myself I didn't recognize anymore." Her voice cracked slightly, and she blinked hard to stop tears. For a second I saw a flicker of the woman I married, the woman who used to laugh at my bad jokes, who helped me build that fire pit in our backyard, who once waited for me with signs at the airport. But that woman had also disappeared the moment my plane lifted off to Kandahar. "You didn't just leave," I finally said. "You gutted me. You turned my life into a crime scene. And when you ran out of lies, you handed me the cleanup bill." "I know," she whispered, "and I live with it every day." There was silence between us, long and heavy. She didn't ask for anything. Not a second chance, not pity, not friendship. And maybe that's why I didn't walk away, because for the first time she wasn't trying to rewrite what had happened, she was owning it. Would you have met her? Would you have sat across from someone who broke you and listened anyway? Tell me in the comments. I want to know where you draw the line between justice and closure. After a few minutes she stood. "I'm moving to Oregon next month. Starting over. I just wanted to say thank you for not destroying me when you could have. You destroyed yourself," I said quietly. "I just stopped getting in your way." She nodded, said goodbye, and walked off toward the bus station. I sat there long after she left, not because I needed time to think, but because I needed space to feel. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even relieved. I was just free. On the drive back to Montana, I thought about what forgiveness actually meant. It wasn't forgetting. It wasn't even understanding. It was letting go of the weight someone else left on your chest. And in that moment, I realized I didn't hate Becky anymore. She had become a closed chapter, no longer a wound, just a scar with a name. That night, I pulled out the letter from the Marine's wife again. Read it like scripture. "You saved our home." That line stayed with me as I stood on the porch, Scout by my side, looking out at the dark pine trees. Forgiveness didn't mean reopening the door. It just meant I could stop looking through the peephole. In Chapter 11, I'll tell you about what happened when the story went public, how veterans and families across the country started reaching out, and how the life I thought had ended turned into something I never saw coming, a mission that finally felt like mine. A few weeks after that final meeting with Becky, the story went public. I hadn't expected it. I figured the case would stay buried in federal records, maybe referenced in a footnote, somewhere long forgotten outside a courtroom. But then a reporter from a veterans advocacy group reached out. She'd been following the fraud case involving Jeremy Spencer and Kinley. She'd heard about the testimonies, the stolen homes the families left with nothing. And then she found my name in the court transcripts. She didn't want a scandal. She wanted the truth. A real story. One that showed how a system designed to protect military families had been quietly weaponized against them, and how someone pushed back. I hesitated at first. I didn't want attention. I'd spent months rebuilding a quiet life. But then I thought about the others, those who weren't as lucky, who never caught on until it was too late. Maybe sharing the story wasn't about reliving the pain. Maybe it was about putting a warning sign on a road too many people had already walked down blind. The piece went live on Memorial Day weekend. It was titled, "While He Was at War, the Quiet Crime That Preyed on Military Families." It detailed the fraud ring, the shell companies, the forged documents, but most of it followed my journey, my deployment, the betrayal, the evidence, the court. My name wasn't redacted, my face wasn't blurred. I made the decision to own the story, beginning to end. And then the messages started. Hundreds of them, emails, letters, social media messages from people I'd never met, veterans, active duty service members, military spouses. Some said they'd gone through the same thing. Others said they narrowly avoided it. A few just said thank you. One message came from a widow in North Carolina. Her husband had served in Iraq. After he died, she nearly lost their home to a man claiming to help widows sell quickly. It was Spencer. She said the article made her realize that she wasn't careless, she'd been targeted. That's when I knew this wasn't just a story anymore. It was a signal, and people were finally paying attention. Have you ever shared something painful and had it help someone else? Let me know in the comments. You'd be surprised what your story might do for someone sitting in silence. The Veterans Affairs Office contacted me 2 weeks later. They wanted to use my experience in a training seminar for their housing support staff. Not just the legal side, but the human side. What it looks like when trust is weaponized. What signs to look for. What questions to ask when someone's financials suddenly don't add up. Then a retired Army colonel invited me to speak at a closed-door roundtable with lawmakers working on a bill to tighten protections on VA loans and military family assets. They wanted stricter identity verification, automatic fraud alerts, and a longer paper trail on any refinance attempt involving a deployed service member. I wasn't a lobbyist, I wasn't a lawyer, but I showed up. I told them I served 20 years in uniform. I faced combat. But what nearly broke me wasn't a battlefield. It was the betrayal that happened back home. And if it can happen to someone like me who prepared, who paid attention, then it can happen to anyone. Some took notes. Some just listened. But I could tell the story landed where it needed to. The media kept circling back. But I didn't want the spotlight. I gave one final interview, a podcast, hosted by a former Marine-turned-journalist. It wasn't polished. It was just real. We talked about what betrayal does to a man, how survival doesn't always look like a heroic return. Sometimes it's a quiet rebuild with shaky hands and stubborn hope. I ended that interview with a message I still stand by. There's always going to be someone out there ready to take advantage of your silence. So don't stay silent. That quote got shared more than I expected. It ended up on shirts, in posts, even carved into a plaque I received from a group of Army spouses in Colorado. I never asked for recognition, but it felt good to know the pain hadn't been wasted. If you had a chance to turn your worst moment into a message that could protect someone else, would you take it? Or would you walk away and try to forget? Tell me. Your answer matters more than you think. Back in Montana, life returned to its steady rhythm. Scout and I stuck to our routines, morning walks, woodshop, afternoons, quiet nights. I still did repairs around town, built furniture on commission. I never turned it into a business. I didn't need to. It was never about the money. It was about keeping something in my hands that I could trust. Something solid. Every now and then someone would send me another story. Another scam averted. Another soldier who paid attention because they heard mine. And in those moments I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Not anger, not pride, just peace. In Chapter 12, I'll take you to the final piece of this journey. The cabin, the dog, the quiet letter I keep on my fridge, and the truth I live with now, not as a soldier or a victim or even a survivor, but as a man who found peace not by forgetting what happened, but by building something no one could take from him again. A year after it all ended, I stood on the porch of my cabin in Montana, coffee in hand, Scout at my side, watching the sun rise over 10 quiet acres. The creek behind the tree line murmured like it always did, a steady sound I'd come to rely on. There was no more war waiting overseas, no courtrooms, no messages from Becky, just the quiet rhythm of a life I rebuilt from the ground up. Not perfect, not easy, but mine. I've changed. I'm not the same man who once checked his email in a desert and watched his world collapse with 3 cold sentences. I've seen what betrayal looks like when it wears the face of someone you once loved. I've learned how fragile trust can be, how quickly something you thought was yours can be signed away, stolen, and sold while you're halfway around the world. But I also learned something else, something stronger, that there's a kind of peace that comes not from forgetting, but from rebuilding with intention. I didn't just survive what Becky and Jeremy did. I didn't just fight back. I became someone new, not harder, not colder, just clearer. I know what matters now. Not the house, not the money, but the integrity I kept, the lives I helped, and the peace I earned by never backing down when the world expected me to fold. That letter from the Navy wife still hangs on my fridge. On hard days, I read it again. "You saved our home," she wrote, and that's what makes it all worth it, not just what I regained, but what I helped others keep. If there's anything I'd want you to take from this story, it's this: you may not get to choose how the storm hits you, but you always get to choose what you do after it passes. That choice, that quiet personal stand, is where real strength lives. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, not just to follow this story, but because here we tell real ones, stories that remind us how human we all are, and sometimes how strong we can be.